Snow came early to Alder Hollow that year. It dusted the pine-lined roads like powdered sugar, coated mailboxes in soft white caps, and painted every porch in peaceful silence. But for Sarah Langley, peace was still a stranger. She sat in the warmth of her postal truck, sipping from a chipped thermos that still smelled faintly of cinnamon and grief. Her gloves were old but dependable, the wool coat too big, it had belonged to her son. And it was his jacket she wore the morning she saw the cub for the first time. It was just past 8 a.m., and her route had taken her to the edge of the old Mill Creek Loop, the farthest rural stop in Alder Hollow. That's when she saw him. A small bear cub, alone, peeking from the underbrush near the timberline. He wasn't moving. Just watching. His fur was a messy patchwork of caramel and ash, with a distinctive white tuft on his chest, a natural mark that caught the morning light. Sarah slowed her truck, her heart skipping. The cub didn't run. He simply stared, head tilted, like he was trying to remember something. She blinked, then drove on, chalking it up to a rare sighting. Bears weren't unheard of this time of year, but a cub, alone in the snow? That was something different. The next morning, he was there again. This time, a few feet closer. Still watching. Still waiting. Sarah felt it in her chest, that odd stirring of recognition, like running into someone you once knew in another life. She stopped the truck, cracked the window, and whispered, "Hey there, little one." The cub blinked slowly, but didn't move. That evening, back at the post office, she told no one. By the end of the week, he was following her truck. Always at a distance, never chasing, just trailing silently behind, paws crunching in the fresh snow. The mail truck would rumble down the long stretch of tree-flanked road, and the cub would appear, watching from the bend. It wasn't fear. Or curiosity. It was something else. The town started noticing. Kids at bus stops pointed. Elderly residents waved from porches, cameras in hand. "That male bear's back again," someone said at the diner. But Sarah didn't laugh. Not like they did. Because every time she saw him, a lump rose in her throat. The white patch on the cub's chest reminded her too much of Ben, her son. He'd always joked that animals trusted him more than people did. He spent more time in the woods with his camera than he ever did in the town. 6 months ago, he never returned from a hiking trip. They found his pack. His camera. Some fur samples. No sign of him. Sarah hadn't opened that camera card. Not yet. But now, every time she looked at that bear cub, her fingers itched for it. The following Tuesday, something changed. The cub had gotten closer, barely 10 feet from her truck. Sarah stopped the engine. The wind was light, snowflakes drifting like ash. She reached out the window and gently dropped a slice of apple onto the ground. The cub stepped forward. One pull. Then another. He picked it up. Chewed slowly. Then looked straight at her with eyes that were too knowing. And Sarah felt it in her bones. This wasn't just a wild animal. Something in that bear remembered. That evening, Sarah sat at her kitchen table, the air heavy with silence and the scent of pine wood logs crackling in the stove. The bear cub's eyes haunted her, not because they were wild, but because they weren't. There was something in the way he had looked at her through the snow. Something too familiar. She opened the old cigar box tucked behind her tea tins, a time capsule of things she wasn't yet ready to let go of. Inside, a pressed maple leaf, a compass, a crumpled trail permit, and Ben's memory card. 6 months she'd avoided it. Now she couldn't wait another day. The card slid into her laptop with a soft click. Folders opened. Images flickered to life. Trees, ridgelines, sunrise across snowy peaks, paw prints in mud. And then, there he was. The cub. Same white chest patch. Same caramel fur. Younger, wobblier. But unmistakably him. Ben had captioned the photo. Camera with flash, little guy orphaned near the burn line. Fed him dried berries. Still afraid of my boots. Day 3. Sarah scrolled further. A selfie of Ben smiling gently, the cub curled up behind him on a bed of pine needles. Camera with flash, Day 7. Slept near me. We're both cold. She stopped at one photo that undid her completely, Ben's glove extended, the cub's paw resting in it. Camera with flash, Day 10. I think he trusts me. Tears spilled before she even realized she was crying. So this wasn't just a bear cub. He was Ben's bear. And somehow, through scent or memory or fate, he had found his way back to her. Sarah began carrying apple slices on her route. Small things. A folded blanket in the back seat. She left little tokens near the woods, a scrap of Ben's old shirt, his dog-eared trail map tucked in a plastic sleeve. Each morning, the cub came closer. Each evening, she wrote his name in her journal. Echo, because he was the last sound of her son's voice still bouncing through the trees. One snowy Thursday, Sarah stopped her truck just before the bend where Echo usually appeared. She opened the door and stepped out, holding out a scarf, red wool, worn soft by time. It had once belonged to Ben. "I think you remember him," she said gently. "Or maybe just the feeling of being safe." Echo emerged from the trees. He didn't lunge. He didn't growl. He sat right across from her. Snowflakes gathered on his ears. His breath puffed clouds into the winter air. Then, after a long pause, he padded forward, took the scarf softly in his teeth, and walked back into the woods. Sarah stood frozen. It wasn't just memory. It was grief. And it was shared. The next morning, the scarf was back, neatly folded near her first mailbox stop, one pine cone placed on top of it. A gift. An answer. Echo wasn't just a cub in the wild. He was trying to keep a connection alive. In the weeks that followed, Sarah began to smile again, a soft smile, fragile but real. People in town stopped asking about the bear. It had become normal now, like seeing mist lift off the river or hearing birdsong at dusk. And though she never touched Echo, never tried to capture him or bring him in, she knew. This was Ben's final story. Still unfolding. Spring slowly melted Alder Hollow's white silence, revealing muddy trails, green buds, and the hum of life returning. But for Sarah Langley, something far more unusual bloomed with the thaw. Each morning, as she drove her old red mail truck through the twisting valley routes, Echo was there, sometimes perched on a slope above the road, sometimes waiting by a certain old tree, always watching. The townsfolk called him the postal bear now. It became a quiet ritual, almost sacred. She would drive. He would follow. Children began waving at Echo when he passed, pointing from behind fences and snowy windows. Someone painted a sign that read Bear Crossing near mile marker 12. Tourists started asking about the legend. But Sarah didn't care for the attention. She cared about the moments. Like when she dropped her glove near the trail, and the next day found it back on her truck step. A pine cone placed on top, like punctuation. Or the time she stopped for a picnic lunch, and Echo sat across the clearing, munching an apple she'd left under a tree. She spoke aloud to him sometimes, stories, updates about town, things she used to tell Ben. "I finally cleared out the closet," she said one day, found his compass. "I think I'll wear it on my route." Echo flicked an ear. One morning, a storm had knocked over the box at the Carter residence, Sarah's last stop for the day. She wrestled it upright, muttering curses as the metal scraped her gloves. The wind howled, and snow whipped sideways across the yard. Then she heard it, a low grumbling huff. She turned. Echo stood across the road. Not following. Not waiting. Just watching. Concerned. It took her breath away. He stayed there until she got back in the truck and started the engine. He didn't leave until she did. Sarah's grief had always felt like a quiet echo, bouncing back to her in moments when the world stilled. But Echo's presence filled the space that grief had hollowed out. He didn't fix her pain. But he understood it. One Sunday afternoon, Sarah brought a worn copy of Ben's favorite children's book, the one about a lost bear finding its way home. She read aloud beneath the oak tree at the edge of the forest. Echo didn't come. Until she closed the book. Then, from the shadows, he stepped out and placed something near her feet. It was a small, chewed-up wooden handle. The remains of a hiking stick. Ben's. She gasped. Held it close. And sobbed. Echo didn't stay. He faded back into the trees as softly as he'd come. But Sarah didn't feel abandoned. She felt seen. As the days grew longer, Echo no longer lingered in the shadows. He walked nearer to the road, sometimes pacing beside her truck for short stretches before vanishing into the brush. They were two wanderers, linked by something invisible, something beyond understanding. And still, he never touched her. That boundary remained. But every now and then, she'd find something left on the trail, a feather, a round stone, a snapped twig arranged in a curious spiral. Each one felt like a letter without words. And every night, she wrote back in her journal, "Dear Ben, I think he remembers you. And he's helping me remember, too." In a town full of whispers, one truth began to rise like spring fog. This bear wasn't wild in the usual way. He belonged to something bigger. Something written in grief, but blooming in love. The first morning Echo didn't appear, Sarah brushed it off. "Maybe he's resting," she whispered aloud as her truck bumped over the frost-bitten road. The trees were still laced with the amber hues of early autumn, and fog curled low across the mountain ridges. Nature was unpredictable, after all, and Echo was still a bear. But when he missed the second morning, something inside her shifted. A quiet dread. A flicker of something she hadn't felt since Ben's disappearance. By the third day, Sarah stopped pretending. She pulled her truck over at the bend in the road where Echo always waited and stood in silence. The forest was too quiet. No broken twigs. No paw prints. No pinecone offering. Just damp earth and fallen leaves. She left an apple and drove on, slower this time, her eyes sweeping the tree line for even a glimpse of caramel fir. Nothing. The next day, she stopped by the ranger station. "Seen any bear activity lately?" she asked casually, but her voice betrayed the urgency beneath. Ranger Caleb frowned. "We've had reports of a poacher's blind near the northern ridge. Fresh traps too. Nothing confirmed yet, but we're checking it out." Sarah's blood ran cold. Would a cub go that far from Mill Creek? Caleb nodded. "If it's not really a cub anymore, yeah. A yearling could travel pretty far." Sarah barely slept that night. She dreamt of the cub limping through thorns, dragging one paw. In another dream, she saw Ben, older weathered, wearing the red scarf and holding a compass. He looked right at her and said, "He's still waiting, Mom. Just not where you're looking." She woke up crying. On the fifth day, she parked at the old clearing near Mill Creek, opened the back of her truck, and pulled out the worn red scarf. She placed it on a flat rock at the forest's edge, a signal, a hope, a plea. "If you're still out there," she whispered, "please come back." She waited an hour. Only wind and rustling branches replied. On the seventh morning, she found the apple still untouched. The scarf was gone. But nearby, nestled between two smooth stones, was something new. A single white feather, and beneath it, an envelope, weather-stained and muddy, but unmistakably addressed in her son's handwriting. Her knees buckled. She raced back to her truck and carefully opened the letter. It was short, scrawled in Ben's messy script. "If someone finds this, the bear is alone. I helped him. He remembers kindness. Please don't let him forget." Her hands shook. The paper smelled like pine and something else, memory maybe. Or grief that hadn't yet settled. That was the moment Sarah understood. This was more than Echo going missing. This was Ben's story surfacing again, one final call from a bond not yet broken. She returned to the ranger station the next day with the note, the feather, and fire in her eyes. "I'm going to find him," she told Caleb. "One way or another." Back home that night, she sat on the porch wrapped in Ben's coat, watching the trees breathe in the wind. The woods felt vast again, too big, too empty. But deep down she knew. Echo hadn't abandoned her. Something had happened. And no matter what it took, she'd follow the trail until she found out the truth. The forest had changed. It no longer whispered like it once had. It breathed differently. Each rustle of leaves and snap of twigs carried tension, as if the woods themselves were waiting for something. Sarah Langley pulled her wool hat tighter around her ears as she trekked beyond the usual postal route, into the northern ridges where Ranger Caleb had warned her to stay cautious. But she couldn't stay away, not while Echo was missing. She wore her son's red scarf and carried his old compass around her neck. It pointed due north, and so did her heart. The first sign came quietly. A paw print, just off the trail, deeper than the others, pressed hard into damp soil. Not from a full-grown bear, but not from a cub either. It was Echo's size. She knelt beside it, fingers trembling. "You're out here, aren't you?" She followed the tracks until they vanished into a thicket, then circled back. It wasn't until she reached the clearing, one she'd never visited before, that she found it. A tangle of broken branches, drag marks, and blood. Her chest tightened. No. But before fear could overtake her, she noticed something else. Footprints. Human. Heavy. Deep-heeled boots. She took a photo and sent it to Caleb. He called her instantly. "That's from a poacher's trap. You need to come back, Sarah." "No," she said quietly. "I think I'm close." That evening, she returned with Caleb and 2 wildlife officers. They fanned out across the ridge, moving in practiced formation. Sarah followed her instincts, and the compass. 30 minutes in, she found it. A crude wooden cage wedged into a ravine, half covered in pine boughs. And inside, curled into a tight ball, wounded but alive, was Echo. Her heart nearly broke at the sight. His eyes opened as she approached. Weary. Alert. Still gentle. The red scarf she had left days ago was balled beneath him like a comfort blanket. He remembered, she whispered. The men disassembled the trap carefully. Echo winced when they lifted him. His back leg had been caught. Sarah stroked the side of his head as he let out a soft chuff of recognition. Caleb looked at her, stunned. He knows you." Sarah didn't answer. She just held tighter to Ben's compass and whispered, "We're going home, sweetheart." Back at the ranger station, Echo was treated and monitored. He wouldn't be returned to the wild until his leg healed fully. Sarah visited every day, bringing apples, reading Ben's old trail notes aloud, sometimes just sitting beside the enclosure in silence. One afternoon, the wildlife vet handed Sarah something Echo had brought with him, found tucked inside the scarf. A folded photo, slightly chewed on the edge. It was a printout of Ben, smiling beside the young cub, both covered in snow. It had been in the scarf. Echo had carried it. Had kept it. That night, Sarah stood alone beneath the stars outside the ranger cabin. She looked up, eyes full of tears, heart heavy and light all at once. "I think I understand now, Ben," she said softly. "You weren't just helping him. You were preparing him to help me." The wind stirred the trees like a whispered reply. In the weeks that followed, Echo's story made headlines. The bear who followed a mail truck, the cub who mourned, the rescued who became rescuer. But to Sarah, he wasn't a symbol. He wasn't a headline. He was family. And the secret he carried, in his memories, in the photo, in the silent loyalty of his return, was one of devotion beyond language. Winter came back to Alder Hollow with a soft hand. The wind was quieter now. The trees, though bare, stood peaceful. And for the first time in many years, Sarah Langley didn't dread the season. She welcomed it, because she knew what winter could bring back. After weeks in rehabilitation, Echo's leg had healed. He was stronger now. His coat glistened under early snowfall, his eyes still deep with that quiet, knowing sadness, and love. The ranger team offered to relocate him deeper into the wilderness, far from people. But Sarah said no. "He'll find where he needs to go," she told them. "He always has." They released him one calm morning at the edge of Mill Creek, the very trail where he had first followed her truck. Echo stood for a long while before stepping into the trees, turning once to meet Sarah's gaze. There was no fear. No hesitation. Only a silent thank you. Then he vanished into the woods. That night, Sarah sat on her porch in the flickering light of a single lantern. The red scarf was wrapped around her shoulders. Ben's compass rested in her palm. She didn't cry. Not this time. A week passed. Then 2. The woods remained still. She wasn't sure she'd see Echo again. Maybe he was gone for good. Maybe his journey with her had served its purpose. But she kept her route. Kept delivering letters. Kept listening to the trees. It was Christmas Eve when the whisper of paws returned. She had just pulled up to the old Mill Creek stop when she saw movement by the bend. Echo. He stepped from behind the trees, larger now, stronger, but unmistakably him. And in his mouth, something soft. He padded toward her and gently placed it on the snowy ground. A small, tattered envelope. One she recognized instantly. It was one of Ben's letters, a note she had written to him months ago and left folded beneath a pine. She gasped. He had kept it. Carried it. Brought it back. Sarah fell to her knees. "Hi," she whispered, voice trembling. "You came back." Echo sat down beside her, not too close, but close enough. His breath curled in the cold air. His ears twitched. His eyes, those quiet, grieving eyes, met hers. And for a moment, she didn't feel alone. She felt whole. Later that evening, she added a new entry to her journal. He doesn't need to stay. I just needed to know, he remembered, that he was safe. That part of Ben, the part that loved unconditionally, still walks this earth on four paws, through trees under snow. Echo is free now. And so am I. In the years that followed, Sarah kept delivering mail. Children in town still told the legend of the mail bear, the one who followed a truck and carried letters in his mouth. Some said they spotted him once a year, just a shadow in the trees. Others didn't believe he'd ever existed. But Sarah never doubted. Every winter, she left a letter by the bend in the road. And every spring, it was gone. And sometimes, just sometimes, a feather or pine cone would be left behind. No words. No sound. Just memory. Just love. And that was enough.